The story begins in a North Korean prison, where a CIA agent named Salt is being held captive and tortured by soldiers. They suspect her of being an American spy attempting to sabotage their nuclear program. However, fortune favors Salt when her CIA colleague, Ted, along with her boyfriend, Mike, arrive to rescue her. Soon after, Salt is released after Mike petitions the U.S. Senate's Department of State, which is subsequently approved by North Korean leader Kim Jong-il under the condition of exchanging Salt for North Korean political prisoners. Later, it is revealed that Mike is actually an arachnologist in North Korea and had been Salt's target during a previous mission. She had to get close to him as part of her cover to infiltrate North Korea more easily. However, during this charade, the two fell in love. On their way back from the prison, Salt confesses that she works for the CIA and expresses concern for Mike's safety, as the North Koreans now know her true identity. But Mike doesn't care. He accepts everything about Salt and wants to spend the rest of his life with her. Several years after her release, Mike and Salt live a normal life as a married couple in Washington, D.C. During this time, Salt has returned to her duties at the CIA office. One day, when Salt prepares to head home, someone suddenly arrives with urgent news. 10 minutes earlier, they had captured a defector claiming to be a Russian KGB agent. Salt and Ted are needed to interrogate him immediately. Due to the urgency, Salt and Ted cancel their plans to leave. When they arrive at the interrogation room, they meet Peabody, a CIA counterintelligence officer handling the case. Salt is assigned to interview the defector directly, while Ted and Peabody observe from outside the room. Moments later, the defector introduces himself as Oleg Vasily Orlov. During the interview, Orlov begins to recount a story about a Soviet wrestler named Sashchenko, who in 1975 fell in love with and married a famous chess player named Annenkova. A year later, they had a daughter. Tragically, 1 month after her birth, the child fell ill with a fever and died in the same hospital where she was born. However, Orlov reveals that the death was a fabrication orchestrated by Russian spies, himself included. The baby was in fact still alive and given the name Chenkov. She, along with other infants, was raised under harsh physical training and psychological programming. They were taught English before learning their native language, all with the goal of creating the ultimate spy unit known as KA-1, agents so skilled that one of them successfully assassinated the president in 1963. As a teenager, Chenkov was adopted by an American family. However, her adoptive parents died in an accident, and she was sent to the U.S. to live a life of lies while awaiting Day X, the moment her long-awaited mission would begin. In the end, Chenkov's mission requires her to travel to New York City to assassinate the Russian president, Matveyev, during the funeral of the vice president. As Salt listened to Orlov's story, a growing sense of unease settled over her. She decided to hand over the interrogation to her colleague, but just as she was about to leave the room, Orlov revealed that the KA-12 operative he had mentioned was none other than Chenkov, now known as Evelyn Salt, a name strikingly close to her full name. Salt froze in panic, especially when the MRI truth scanner confirmed that everything Orlov had said was true. Ted and Peabody, watching from outside, were equally stunned. As Salt stepped out of the interrogation room, Ted and Peabody intercepted her. Standing before them, Salt vehemently denied Orlov's accusations. Yet, deep down, she began to fear for her husband's safety. She tried calling him, but her calls went straight to voicemail. In the end, Peabody instructed Salt to wait in the interrogation room. Meanwhile, Orlov, who was being transferred to a holding cell, suddenly attacked and killed 2 guards in the elevator using a hidden blade in his shoe, then fled the building. Moments later, the emergency alarm blared. An agent rushed to inform Ted and Peabody about the incident. Seizing the opportunity, while everyone's attention was focused on Orlov's escape, Salt attempted to flee as well, fearing for her husband's life. Unfortunately, her escape was caught on CCTV. Exiting the building was no longer an option, as all exits had been sealed following the elevator incident. As Salt passed through the lobby, she realized her presence had been detected and made a break for the emergency stairs. Meanwhile, Peabody, now aware of Salt's location, ordered all exit doors to be locked, trapping her inside. But Salt, a highly trained secret agent, wasn't out of options. She grabbed a fire extinguisher and sprayed the CCTV cameras in the room, cutting off Ted and Peabody's ability to monitor her movements. Peabody, realizing what had happened, panicked and immediately rushed to Salt's location with his team. As he climbed the emergency stairs, he received a message on his phone revealing Salt's true identity. It turned out that Salt was a Russian sleeper agent who had been posing as the vice president of product development at Ring Petroleum. Not only that, she was also an explosives expert and a master of deadly close combat techniques. Back with Salt, after disabling the cameras, she hastily mixed cleaning chemicals to create an explosive device. As she worked on assembling it, her phone rang. It was her colleague, Ted, who warned her that her actions were dangerous and urged her to move to a monitored area where they could ensure her safety. He informed her that a tactical team would arrive in 30 seconds. However, Salt paid no heed to Ted's warning. Her mind was solely focused on her husband's safety. Moments later, a fully armed tactical team, clad in masks, arrived at Salt's location. Peabody then ordered the automatic doors to be opened and gas to be deployed. As soon as the doors slid open, Salt detonated the makeshift explosive she had crafted, creating a massive blast. Seizing the chaos, she grabbed a weapon from one of the fallen tactical team members, shot out a window, and escaped the building. While barefooted, she sprinted down the street and hailed a taxi, directing it to her apartment. When she arrived, Salt found her apartment in complete disarray. Suddenly, her pet dog approached her, whimpering and leading her to Mike's chair, as if trying to tell her that Mike had been taken. With her dog by her side, Salt searched the apartment, sensing something was terribly wrong. She grabbed a bag of weapons and her husband's venomous spider, stored in a jar, before preparing to leave. Not long after, Peabody and Ted, along with their team, stormed Salt's apartment. They broke down the door and threw in a flashbang grenade. In response, Salt escaped through the window, scaling the side of the building. While Peabody frantically searched for her, he failed to notice Salt hiding behind an AC unit. Fortunately, Salt spotted a young girl studying inside a nearby apartment. She knocked on the window, and the girl opened it. At that moment, Salt seized the opportunity to change her clothes and entrusted her beloved dog to the girl. After escaping the apartment, Salt walked down the street, only to be spotted by Ted. He began following her while calling Peabody to report her location. Realizing she was being tailed, Salt broke into a run, sparking a high-speed chase through the streets. This time, Salt found herself cornered on a bridge. Desperate, she pleaded with her pursuers, insisting she was innocent and only wanted to find her husband. But Peabody refused to believe her, aiming his weapon at her while firing off accusatory questions. Feeling trapped, Salt made a daring decision. She leaped off the bridge, landing on a passing cargo truck below. Unfortunately, as she jumped, she was shot in the side. Peabody and Ted watched in shock, but didn't give up the chase. They pursued her relentlessly, but Salt managed to evade them, leaping from one truck to another until she finally escaped on a stolen motorcycle. Despite their efforts, Ted and Peabody lost her. By nightfall, Salt, having once again eluded her pursuers, was seen tending to her gunshot wound. She used a sponge and bandages to stop the bleeding. After patching herself up, she boarded a bus headed for New York. Using a fake identity, Salt eventually arrived in the city and checked into a hotel directly across from the church where the vice president's funeral and the Russian president's attendance was scheduled to take place. At the hotel, Salt not only hid, but also prepared the equipment she had retrieved from her apartment, including grenades and the spider venom she had extracted. She planned to infiltrate the church the next day when the Russian president arrived. To perfect her disguise, Salt removed her dental prosthetics and soft contact lenses, then dyed her hair to make herself harder to recognize. The following day, during the funeral of the U.S. vice president, which was attended by the Russian president, security was exceptionally tight. Rumors of an assassination threat against the Russian president had put everyone on high alert. Shortly after, Salt, now in her new appearance, arrived at the scene, blending in with the mourners. Peabody and Ted were also present, overseeing the security measures. Meanwhile, the underground station near the funeral venue had been closed. Salt, a double agent working for both American and Russian intelligence, began executing her plan. While riding a train, she created a diversion by setting a piece of paper on fire, filling the area with smoke. Taking advantage of the chaos, Salt leaped off the speeding train and slipped into the tunnels below. Through these tunnels, she managed to infiltrate the church. Moments later, Salt swiftly incapacitated several guards she encountered. Meanwhile, Matveyev was delivering a eulogy on stage. Peabody, receiving reports that his team in the underground area had gone silent, rushed down to investigate. On the other side, Salt had positioned herself directly above where Matveyev was speaking. She shot at several electrical installations, causing all the church bells to ring simultaneously. In the ensuing confusion, the floor beneath Matveyev suddenly collapsed due to explosive Salt had planted earlier. As Matveyev tried to get up from the crumbling floor, Salt shot him without hesitation. Peabody, hearing the gunfire, sprinted toward the scene. But he was too late. Matveyev lay lifeless on the ground. Salt, still holding her weapon, didn't shoot Peabody. Instead, she calmly surrendered, placing her gun on the ground and allowing herself to be arrested. As a result, Peabody was baffled, questioning why she hadn't tried to escape or eliminate him. Ted, upon learning that Salt was the perpetrator, was furious and deeply disappointed. Salt was then escorted by several police cars to a holding facility. Everything seemed to be going smoothly during the transport. However, Salt, who had initially surrendered without resistance, had only been using this as a tactic to escape the scene unnoticed. Suddenly, Salt launched an attack on the officers inside the vehicle, swiftly overpowering them. She seized a stun gun and fired at the driver, causing him to reflexively slam on the gas. Salt then took advantage of the chaos, steering the car to crash into the police vehicle in front and the one trailing behind, leaving the officers incapacitated. The car Salt was careened off a bridge and landed in a parking lot below. Quickly, Salt climbed out of the wreckage, removed her handcuffs, and walked away calmly from the scene. The story then shifted to a ferry, where, after successfully escaping, Salt left New York City to meet Orlov at his hideout alongside other spies. During her journey, Salt was haunted by flashbacks of her childhood in the Soviet Union, where she had been trained by Orlov alongside other children. She also recalled the moment she was exchanged for the real Evelyn Salt, an American girl who had died in a car accident in the Soviet Union along with her parents. Meanwhile, in a scrapyard, Orlov was seen watching the news about the death of the Russian president, Matveyev. When Orlov turned around, he saw Salt approaching. At that moment, Orlov greeted her with a warm embrace, as if reuniting with his own child. It turned out that everything Orlov had said during the interrogation was true. Salt was indeed Chenkov, the daughter of a famous wrestler and chess player. All the information Orlov had provided about Matveyev's assassination had been instructions meant for Salt. Orlov was overjoyed that his agent had carried out the mission as planned. Salt was then taken to a ship by the sea, which served as Orlov's headquarters alongside other spies. Convinced that her husband had been kidnapped by Orlov, Salt immediately demanded to know his whereabouts. Orlov led her to Mike, but this was a test of Salt's loyalty. In front of her, Mike was executed by drowning while other agents held her at gunpoint. Though devastated by her husband's death, Salt showed no outward reaction. Orlov, now even more convinced of her loyalty, decided to proceed with their next mission, the assassination of the president. Salt was instructed to meet an agent posing as a NATO operative waiting for her on a plane. It was then that Salt saw her chance to act. With lightning speed, she turned on Orlov, taking him down in an act of vengeance for her husband's death. In the end, Salt grabbed several weapons and grenades, confronting the remaining agents and taking them down one by one. The next day, Salt continued with the plan Orlov had set in motion. On the plane, she met the NATO operative as instructed. The operative turned out to be Schneider, a fellow trainee from her childhood days in the Soviet program. Schneider now served as a NATO liaison to the White House, while secretly working as a Russian spy. Together, they planned to infiltrate the White House and assassinate the president. Later, Schneider showed Salt a map of the bunker located beneath the White House and provided her with a NATO identification badge to help her blend in. That night, Schneider and Salt, disguised as men in NATO uniforms, successfully entered the White House without raising suspicion. Inside the building, Ted was seen escorting the president. As the president stepped out of the elevator, Schneider suddenly initiated the attack, firing wildly toward the president. As a result, Ted reacted quickly, shielding the president and rushing him back into the elevator. In the chaos, Schneider sacrificed himself by detonating a grenade. Amid the confusion, Salt made her way upstairs, removed her mask, and shed the NATO uniform. After the incident, Ted became convinced he had seen Salt among the NATO operatives. The CIA immediately announced her presence in the building and instructed everyone to be on high alert for an imposter disguised as a NATO operative. The president was then taken to the underground bunker for safety. Meanwhile, using her skills, Salt managed to follow the president into the underground facility, neutralizing several guards who stood in her way. Once inside the bunker, Salt saw the president, Ted, and other agents securing the area. Unexpectedly, Salt slipped into the bunker just before the doors were sealed. At that moment, the president realized that Salt was acting on orders from Russia. As a result, in the weapon control room, the president ordered the activation of nuclear weapons as a precautionary measure, anticipating a potential retaliatory strike from Russia following the death of their president. Soon after, Salt approached the control room where the president was stationed and fired at the control panel, causing significant damage. The technicians inside the room immediately noticed the disruption. The damage jammed the outer portal doors and disabled most of the security cameras. In response, 2 CIA agents were sent out to investigate, but Salt swiftly incapacitated them. On the other side, the president began inputting secret codes to unlock nuclear control access. Each step triggered multiple security protocols, ensuring that the nuclear launch could be executed at any moment and remained entirely under his control. The tension in the air thickened as Salt was caught on a security camera near the control room. The officers inside immediately reached for their weapons, but before they could act, Ted swiftly seized a firearm and shot every officer in the room, except for the president. Before incapacitating the president, Ted introduced himself as Nikolai. He then took control of the Department of Defense's computer, which had just been activated by the president, preparing to launch nuclear missiles toward Mecca, Saudi Arabia, and Tehran. His plan was to annihilate 9 million people, incite 1 billion Muslims to rise against the United States, and plunge the world into chaos. Meanwhile, Salt stood frozen behind the glass window, horrified by the carnage in the control room caused by Ted's ruthless assault. As he turned to face her, he smirked, almost as if he were welcoming his fellow operative. It became clear that Ted was not only Salt's younger comrade, but also someone who had been trained alongside her under Orlov. They exchanged words through the glass as Salt attempted to persuade Ted to let her into the room. However, their conversation was abruptly interrupted by a breaking news report flashing across the television screen. It revealed that Matveyev, whom Salt had believed to be dead, had miraculously survived. Rather than being killed, he had only been placed in a state of unconscious by the spider venom Salt had previously used. Shocked by this revelation, Ted immediately refused to let Salt join him and instead revealed a devastating truth. He had orchestrated the kidnapping and murder of Mike. Salt was originally supposed to recruit Mike into their group, but instead, she had fallen in love with him. Ted had also arranged for Orlov to expose Salt's true identity. But that was not all. He planned to frame Salt for the imminent nuclear attack. Enraged, Salt fired at Ted through the glass, but her bullets were useless against the bulletproof barrier. Determined to stop him, she desperately searched for a way to break into the room. After finally managing to gain entry, a fierce gunfight erupted between them until both ran out of bullets. Left with no other choice, they engaged in brutal hand-to-hand combat. Thanks to her superior tactics, Salt ultimately overpowered Ted and aborted the nuclear launch just in time. However, her victory was short-lived. Just as she stopped Ted, a squad of Secret Service agents led by Peabody stormed in. The agents fired at Salt, but her bulletproof vest absorbed the impact. She was quickly apprehended, while Ted emerged as the supposed hero of the situation. As Salt was being escorted away in chains, they passed Ted, who was seated and holding a pair of scissors, waiting for the right moment to strike. His intent was clear. He planned to kill her. But Salt, fueled by vengeance, acted first. With lightning speed, she hooked her chains around Ted's neck and leaped over the staircase railing. The force of the fall strangled him instantly, ending his life in a single, decisive move. Following Ted's death, Salt was transported by helicopter, accompanied by Peabody, who was in charge of her custody. During the flight, Peabody interrogated her, demanding answers. At that moment, Salt explained that Orloff's appearance at the office earlier had been part of Ted's plan. She revealed that Ted had not only plotted to launch the nuclear missiles, but also intended to shift the blame onto her. Furthermore, she warned Peabody that there were still numerous sleeper agents like Ted embedded within the U.S. Initially, Peabody was skeptical of Salt's claims. However, a text message on his phone confirmed that Ted's fingerprints had been found on the barge where Orloff and his operatives were killed. This undeniable evidence caused Peabody to reconsider. Silently, he unlocked Salt's handcuffs and pretended to strike her. Then, in a hushed voice, he granted her the opportunity to escape. Without hesitation, Salt seized her chance. She leaped from the helicopter and plunged into the river below. Quickly swimming to shore, she vanished into the dense forest, disappearing without a trace. And with that, the story came to an end. Moral lesson from the story: if you're going to pretend to be someone else, don't forget to check if your dog knows the truth. Loyal pets can't keep secrets. Also, always check your partner's dental records before marriage, just in case they're a secret assassin.